My name is Shani George. I'm a psychotherapist and founder of Culture Minds Therapy. My role is to take therapy outside of the office and to you all at home. I bring to you the mind behind your favourite guests. We speak about mental health, therapy and self-care. Hi guys, I hope you're well. Welcome to Therapy with Sharp, the online conversation where I interview special guests and we have great conversations about mental health. And today joining me is a very, very special guest from the Receipts podcast. Please welcome Audrey.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Lovely to have you here. I've been wanting to interview you for a very long time now, so I'm very grateful to have you here today. I'm going to ask you a question. Mm-hmm. When was the last time you felt low?
Ooh, do you know what? Yeah, I'm not even going to lie to you. Maybe yesterday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But when I get like that, I really try not to revel in it. I really try with everything in my power not to sit in that feeling.
Okay.
Because I can be an overthinker.
Mm-hmm.
So if I allow that feeling to manifest, then it can turn ugly. So when I feel that coming on, I try to get myself out of it. Okay. But yeah, yesterday, it wasn't anything too deep, but yeah.
But it was just a low moment.
It was a low moment, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the reason why I asked you that was because I just want to normalise that we can feel low and happy at different periods and points of our life.
Yeah.
And you just said yesterday. I was thinking you were going to say last week or, I've had a happy week. But yesterday.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
We are here to talk about mental health. Mm-hmm. But before we get into that, I want to congratulate you for all the work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
Especially for the culture. The Receipts podcast.
Yeah.
As we know, it's an amazing podcast.
Thank you.
And it's kind of like you guys say, you're here to help people with dilemmas, their problems, and just that WhatsApp group, but the open WhatsApp group that we could all relate to. Yeah. Because we all have the conversations that you girls do. Mm-hmm. And you guys are normalising that. You're normalising these conversations that we're secretly having in our WhatsApp group. So thank you for that. And being a host on Talk That Talk. Yeah. Being an author. Yeah. Doing live shows. Yeah. So you've been doing incredible things. How does it feel to be such a role model within the Black culture or just wider culture in general? How does it feel?
It feels good, and I know a lot of people are weird about the term role model because they feel like it's too much responsibility or they're not here to raise anyone's kids or, that sort of thing. But I take it really seriously. I do feel like I have somewhat of a responsibility. And I think even if I wasn't a visible person doing all of the things you just said, I still feel like you can be a role model just by living your best life and being a good example, just to the people around you. Mm-hmm. And so it's nice, when I was growing up, I didn't have anyone like us. Yeah. I am 35, going to be 36 soon. Mm-hmm. And there was nothing like it. We didn't really have that many Black women in the spotlight that you could relate to. Yeah. So I love that, we're able to do that for the younger girls and younger women. I love that they have us. Does that make sense? So
I love that as well because I feel like our generation, we are normalising so many different things.
We sure are.
And I feel like previous generations, it was more, especially within our culture, slavery, racism. And not to say that these things don't exist now, but I feel like our generation, we're normalising things that our parents would never normalise. Mental health, the conversations that you guys have about relationships and friendships and intimacy, we're actually normalising it. And we're making people feel comfortable. And that's so important. Yeah. Because it just makes us feel that we're all human beings. Because in the world we live in today, everyone is in that social media phase where picture perfect. So being able to break down those barriers, it just feels so good.
Honestly.
It feels really good.
Honestly, I always say that the podcast to me, it feels like the end of the day when you get home you take your bra off, like in a world where like everyone's like everything's really contrived and everything's curated and everything's perfect and like everyone looks the same and blah blah blah, and then you've got us and we're talking about wild things that happen to women every single day, but maybe like you were saying haven't necessarily been normalized, haven't been conversations that have been brought to the forefront. So it feels nice to be like, I don't know, to be part of something that is like reflecting reality, like that feels nice. So yeah.
And you're being yourselves as well. You're not playing up to a camera.
Yeah.
You're not doing anything scripted. You're just being you.
Yeah.
And I think that's why you ladies have done so well, because you're just being yourself, and everyone can relate. You know, so it's kind of comforting. Actually, I feel like it's comforting. And you have spoken about mental health on the podcast, which we will talk about in a bit more detail. But as a Black woman, how do you feel speaking about mental health? What are your thoughts around the topic?
I think it's really important. Like I have like literally zero issues speaking about it, because I feel like luckily we live in a time now where we are starting to normalise the conversations about our mental health and the state of our minds and stuff like that. And so to have a platform in the midst of that coming to the forefront feels really good, because I don't have to hide away or shy away anymore. Like honestly, when I was coming up, there was no discussions about mental health. Like what I knew of mental health genuinely, and I know this might sound ignorant, but it was people that had the more severe conditions, like, you know, people, you know, there was a lot of stigma attached to it. Like you didn't really think of it as just, okay, mental health is something that we all have, but we all manifest it in different ways. To me, like, you know, mental health, it was like, we didn't even say mental health, we just said that person's mental, you know, and it was really quite, like, when I look back, it's quite bad, like the way that we stigmatise people with severe mental health conditions, and that's all I knew about it. So the fact that we've come full steam ahead now, and like in the workplace, they're implementing like self-care days and mental health days and stuff like that, I think it's so important, because you know, if you break your leg, everyone can respect that you need to put a cast on it and heal. But why do we not treat the same? Why don't we give our minds the same grace kind of thing? So I'm here for it, and I love talking about it. You know, if I can share my experiences and it helps someone else, then all the better. Yeah.
I love that. And that's the reason why I interview guests, special guests such as yourself, is because not only do you like speaking about it, you can influence other people to speak about it and also seek therapy, which is what brings into the business, my business that I have, Culture Minds Therapy. So I found that interviewing people, they always inspire other people to seek therapy. So that's exactly what you are doing and what you will do. There's one quote that I love that you said. So before we get into why you kind of think the worst case when it comes to mental health and why you think on that side of the spectrum, a quote that you said on the podcast that I love.
What did I say, girl? I say some wild things.
You said, what did you say? I want to get it right. You said, God will bring you the right therapist through your prayers. Do you remember saying that?
Yeah.
That is so powerful.
Yeah.
Because I say the same thing. I know you're a Christian. I'm Christian as well. And one of the things that I would say to my friends as therapists and just general friends is that we do need prayer, 100%, but you also need therapy. Yeah. And through your prayer, God could lead you to that therapist.
Absolutely.
And when you said that, I was like, yeah, you know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I feel like in therapy, in the Western worlds, we don't really pay much attention to religion, spirituality. It's very much the science behind things.
Facts.
So it's actually nice that you even said that, you know, God will lead you to that person. Because many people feel that, if I'm praying, you know, what if it doesn't happen? But it's all about that belief that God will bring you to that person.
100%.
So yeah, thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
Because
sometimes I say profound things. I'm like, I said that.
You said that. You need to get a book of all the things that you say.
I do.
That encourage other people.
I actually do. Yeah, a book of affirmations. That's actually an idea.
There you go.
That's an idea.
10%, I get 10%.
Yeah, 100%.
Right, so moving back to why you felt, why you think about, not necessarily the worst case scenario, but the mental illness on the other end of the spectrum. And when I say the other end of the spectrum, mental health is on a continuum, right? So there's the low level and then there's the high level.
Yeah.
People who are on the high level of the continuum are people who have mental health illnesses, so the schizophrenias, people who struggle with bipolar as well. And I know you've mentioned on the podcast that your dad worked in a psychiatric hospital, and you had an auntie with, was it schizophrenia?
Yeah.
So how did that shape your view on mental health?
I think it just kind of reinforced that mindset that I think we all just had about mental health, because we weren't educated on it back in the day. We definitely didn't really acknowledge it as something that, like, mental health being this holistic thing that we all have. So for me, I saw those extremes. So when I heard the word mental, that's just what I thought of straight away. My dad worked on the psychiatric ward. He was a social worker on the psychiatric ward. And so I saw that firsthand. Like, if I would go, like, me and my siblings would go with my mum sometimes to pick my dad up from work. And sometimes he would, if we just went to his workplace or whatever, like, we would sometimes see his patients. Like, and so I got firsthand experience seeing that. And, like, again, on the more extreme end of the scale. So that really was all I knew about it back then. And then I had an auntie that had severe schizophrenia, severe, to the point where she would have episodes and get quite violent. And it was, as a child, it was quite traumatic. I would have been 9 or 10 at the time. And I just had this vivid memory of, like, 1 minute she would be completely fine and we'd be talking and I have a really vivid memory of me and her in the kitchen and she was doing the dishes and she was asking me about school. And I was like, she was so lovely and warm and kind. And then literally in the same day, being sort of, like, restrained by family members because, she would have episodes and get really, really bad. She eventually died from it. So, that's just what I saw. That's what I knew, and that's how I contextualized it. I didn't know that it was such a spectrum. I honestly just thought you're either of sound mind or you're not. And there really wasn't much scope for a middle ground, you know.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I can imagine how traumatizing that was for you, especially as a young girl. How old was you when you were seeing these
I would have been about 10, and I remember one time she had gone to bed. They'd put her down to bed and my grandma needed to go to the toilet. And I remember being so scared because I remember my nan literally creeping up the stairs, like not wanting to wake her because she could wake up and get violent. And I remember my heart beating and I was going, I've got to go with Nana, I've got to go with her, like she can't go by herself, So it was a lot for a young kid.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how did you feel growing up being surrounded by that? So you had your dad who worked in a psychiatric hospital and you would hear his stories. Yeah. Then you had your auntie and then you had your own fear. How did you feel growing up in that environment?
I remember since young, I've always been able to compartmentalize quite well. So I remember always just finding a way to block it out. Like I don't think, even though when I saw certain things, it felt really scary and really big at the time, I remember being able to, like, put it away. And so, for me, especially with my dad, like, that was just his job. Like, I didn't really internalize it as anything more than that. But I remember, like, I would hear whispers and I would hear stories and, I would think, wow, but, like, none of it really made sense to me. It's only looking back now that I think, wow, like, that's crazy. I remember my dad had a patient who, he got beaten up by the police and that's how we ended up severely mentally ill. And I remember I compartmentalized that, and it's not until, like, more recently when, you're hearing things in the news and police brutality and stuff like that, it all came flooding back and I was like, wow, like, this isn't a new thing. Like, and this isn't an American thing. Like, this was in London, So I remember just being able to separate it quite well and isolating it. It wasn't because it wasn't an everyday thing, and it wasn't in my everyday close immediate circle. It was my dad's job and an auntie that I didn't see very often. Does that make sense?
And I think in the black culture as well, I can't speak for all cultures because I'm black. I do feel like we have either that uncle or that auntie who is not well, and we don't know what's wrong with that auntie or uncle. And they get called, even back home, you call them by their name, not even by their name, you call them, the mad one, or the one that's lost his mind, or so we kind of, like, we bring it on within our culture, and that leads to the stigma within our culture, particularly because within our culture, not a lot of people seek therapy.
Yeah.
Or it's very hard to get people from our culture to get to a stage where they feel comfortable enough to speak about mental health, because it's like, what happens in this house stays in this house.
That part.
And don't be talking our business to some woman or some man that you don't know. And that stays ingrained in us, and it can affect us, because then we don't speak and then we suppress and then we overthink, and then we're in a battle with our minds by ourselves alone. So in the Black culture, do you think that there's still stigma? Although we're normalising it and we're talking about it, do you think that there's still an element of stigma still there?
Oh yeah, 1,000,000%. I think, you know, millennials and Gen Z, obviously, we're privileged because we have the language, like we have the information at our disposal to, you know, just read more and to educate ourselves more. And, you know, I always like to give the older generation a bit of grace, because you can only know what you know.
Yeah.
You can only make the most of what is the tools that are at your disposal. Like, you can't, do you know what I mean? So I do give a little bit of grace. So, like, you know, I think that as privileged people who, you know, we have the benefit of information, of the internet and stuff like that, I make it my personal duty to, like, educate my family, you know, and try to make those changes where you can, obviously doing what I do, speaking to loads of people, but the majority of the people that listen to us are young, so they're probably going to be quite aware of this language. And but the older generation, definitely, I think we all have a responsibility to teach them. You know, and I teach my mum things all the time. Like, my mum still, she might say ignorant things, or but I think because I had parents that worked in that field, that they were a little bit more well versed. But if you don't have that, you don't have that. If you don't know, you don't know. But 100% think we still have stigma when it comes to mental health, and I think for all the reasons you said, like, we are a community, we keep things in, like, we don't share our problems, you don't talk outside. I 100% grew up that way. My mum doesn't even like me having friends. Like, my mum is like, you don't tell anyone your business. If you've got any problems, you come and tell me. But I've always found comfort in speaking to other people. Like, and I used to think there was something wrong with me, because my mum, like, and I love my mum, bless her, but she always made it seem like, no, you don't share your problems. And I was like, no, but I really do get comfort from telling my friends things and blah, blah, blah. So I do think we've still got a really, really long way to go. I definitely think it's a cultural thing, but I think, you know, with the younger generation pushing through and just normalising these things, I think it will get better. Yeah,
no,
definitely.
100%. One word that you used was privilege. And I was talking to my friend the other day, and I was saying that I feel like therapy is a privilege.
Oh, yeah.
Especially now. I feel like due to COVID and due to an increase in people struggling with mental health difficulties, therapists, we have to up our prices only because we need to live. We need to live a lifestyle, right? And we need to meet that demand, because we know the NHS waiting list is long. So in order for us to meet that demand, we need to do certain things to make that happen. Do you think therapy is a privilege? Because I know you said you have gone to therapy. Do you think therapy is a privilege?
I 100% think it's a privilege. You know, with everything that we've got to pay for, especially if you live in London, you know, it's so expensive just existing to have this extra cost. Like, it is, you know, it's a lot. So I definitely think it is. I you know, in my mind, it's a human right. I think that, like, everybody should have someone they can talk to. Like, everybody should have one person they can confide in. But unfortunately, to be able to access it is a privilege. So, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I think you used the right terminology. To access it is a privilege, but it should be normalised. That everyone should have a form of therapy, and depending on how much you're suffering, what condition you have, then things can get developed further. You've been open about you going to therapy because you felt like you wanted to speak to someone and have that person to speak to. How did you find therapy, and are you still in therapy? Yes,
like, do you know what? I'm fully still in therapy, and now it's such a permanent fixture in my life now. I can't imagine not having my therapist. And it was interesting because someone was like to me, don't you think it's a bit bad that you're becoming dependent on it? And I said, well, do you know what, there's worse things I could be addicted to. You know, there's worse things. I don't see that as a bad thing. Like, for me, it was a preventative measure when I first started, because there were so many, like, conversations about mental health, and a lot of people around me were getting therapists, and I guess I still have that mindset that you seek help when you have a problem. And I was like, hang on, what if I use therapy as a preventative tool? why do I have to wait for something to kick off before I go and speak to someone about it? Why not start before the problem arises, kind of thing? So that was my main reason for doing it. I was like, I consider myself to have good mental health. I never really thought about, I'd never suffered from anything chronic. I'd never had I never believed that I'd had depression or anything like that. Obviously you have depressive moments or whatever, but I never felt like I had any mental health issues, like genuinely. But I was like, I just want to, at first it was kind of curiosity. I was like, I just want to see what this is like, what it's about. And then, interestingly enough, so I did start my therapy journey, and then I did hit a real life crisis.
Oh, wow.
You know? And so then when I had this life crisis, it was good because I had already established a relationship with my therapist, and I could go to her and be like, this is what I'm going through, this is how I feel about it. And so I'm glad I did it. Like, it's honestly been the best decision, and I wouldn't change it for the world.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I like that. I really like the fact that you took ownership. And although you wasn't struggling at the time of seeking therapy, you got to a place where you were struggling and you had that relationship and you were able to speak to your therapist about the struggles that you had. And I think, I really do like that. And I feel like a lot more people should do that, because nobody knows when you're going to struggle mentally. You know, any trigger could set anybody off, and I think it's important for us to be aware of that and to know that. How long have you been in therapy for? Has it been?
I'd say since before lockdown.
Okay.
So a good couple of hours, you know, a good couple of years.
Okay, nice.
I started just before lockdown, yeah.
Oh, lovely.
And I've been through a couple. You know, I haven't just had one therapist. Like, I've had a couple.
Okay.
I'm on a new one now, only because my other therapist was retiring.
Okay.
And I was just like, what?
What are you retiring?
You're leaving me. Like, won't you need the money when you retire? Like, can't you just squeeze me in? Like, just see me like once a week. And she was like, Audrey, no. I've put in my shift, you know. Bless her. And obviously I didn't have a choice. But a couple of years, been through a couple of people, but now I've got a new therapist and she's amazing. At the moment, she's a black woman.
Okay.
So yeah, she's amazing. I've been through a couple. I can't lie to you, and I think that that's something that, like, I don't know, maybe we should talk about more, just because you don't find a therapist and it works out straight away. Like, there still needs to be a level of chemistry. There still needs to be a level of, I don't even really know the words, but I had a white woman before, and it just didn't work out. Not because she was a white woman, it just didn't work out. I think she was in America. And then I found the perfect therapist. Like, she was amazing. I loved her. She was just perfect. She just got me. We just meshed well. And then she retired, and I was absolutely devastated. And so off the back of her retiring, I had to find someone else, you know, and now I've got another black woman therapist, and she's amazing as well.
Oh, lovely. So let's talk about that then. So finding a therapist, how difficult, was that difficult for you to find a therapist, first of all?
The first time I tried, I didn't know what the hell to do. Okay. I just Googled therapist in London. And initially I went with what I could afford. I'm not going to lie to you. And then after that, that didn't work out. And I was like, do you know what? I just have to keep on trying people until something sticks. Okay. Luckily, by the time I found my second therapist, I really hit it off with her, and I knew from the first session that she was the one for me, pretty much. But it was pretty straightforward. I mean, I just went on the internet and just Googled, but I did really take my time, you know, because
that process.
Exactly. It really was like a process of elimination. I found a few that were based, like, at the time. No, this was before lockdown. Yeah, so at the time it was like face-to-face and stuff like that, and I just narrowed it down to location, and so it was, but it took a while. Like, I didn't just jump straight into it. Okay. And I hesitated as well. I was like, girl, are you doing too much? Like, do you really need this? But I just wanted to try it out and see what would happen. Okay. Yeah.
So that's nice to hear the process of how it took you to find a therapist, and that you did do your research. Yeah. And you kind of saved a few therapists in your mind and kind of, okay, let me go ahead with this one. Because sometimes people think, oh, that therapist is the perfect therapist, but that's not always going to be the case. You may need to kind of shop around a bit for that right therapist 100%. And search until you get that, the right person where you feel like you've got that chemistry and that understanding, because it's a relationship. Yeah, absolutely. And you don't want to jump into a relationship with anyone and have to keep retelling your story or talking about things and building that relationship. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to ask you now. So you're in therapy, you're enjoying your journey in therapy, it's helping you. How are you taking care of your mental health now that you didn't do before?
Ooh, that's a really good question. What am I doing differently? Do you know what, right? I would say that I can't think of anything like physical that I'm doing. Like I can't say that I've taken up swimming or something like that. But what I have definitely taken is off the back of therapy, like the tools that my therapists have taught me. Like I really do find myself applying them to my life now.
Okay.
In not so obvious ways. Like it's so interesting because people will tell me that I'm different, like in a good way.
Oh, that's good.
You know, and so because sometimes there's no way of measuring like how something's working. I just know what I get out of it after I leave a session. I feel good. I feel elated. I feel like I've vented. But it's really nice when people can come back and be like, actually, like, I like the way that you handled this or the way that you addressed that. And, you know, I feel like you're different for the better kind of thing. So I would say more there's things that I've taken, tools that I've taken about maybe just stopping and thinking before being impulsive. I can be a very impulsive person. And like, now I do stop and take time before I do something wild or say something crazy. I do take out that time, you know. So I think that like off the back of having a therapist, it's just given me extra tools to like just navigate life just that little bit differently. But also actually the most important thing that I would say that I've started doing, which is probably a physical thing, is being kinder to myself.
Oh, wow.
That is the one thing that my therapist taught me that I didn't even realise I was so horrible to myself. Like really harsh, and I would do things to trigger myself. And we kind of got to the bottom of like, why do you think that you do that to yourself? And I didn't realise it was like something I was doing until I'd go into my sessions and I'd tell my therapist, she'd be like, why would you do that? That's so mean. Like the way you talk to yourself, you wouldn't talk to a friend like that. Yeah. So why'd you talk to yourself like that? So now I give myself grace. Like I can be quite hard on myself. Yeah. And I can be like, if something happens, I'll be like, oh, well, what did you do to deserve it? Like, how has this come back round on you? Okay. Whereas now I'm like, no, I didn't actually deserve that. Like, no, talk to yourself nicer. Be kinder to yourself. Like, don't be so harsh. So yeah, definitely I would say that.
Okay, that's lovely. And that's all about conceptualization. So being able to conceptualize what's going on and not be mean to yourself and treat yourself how you would treat a friend. Yeah. Because it's funny, we often treat friends lovingly and kindly, but then to ourselves, we're like horrible and we're our worst enemy. Yeah, it's bizarre. So that's a good analogy. So treat yourself how you would treat a loving friend. Definitely. Should I say. Definitely. Before we end, do you have any questions for me?
I would like to ask you... Oh, God, okay. What would you say is your biggest takeaway from sitting down with people like myself and having these conversations?
Oh, my God, that's a good question.
It's off the dome as well.
I would say healing, understanding. Yeah, healing and understanding. And I say that because us as therapists, we take on a lot. And therapists, we do need therapy as well. You know, I feel like sometimes people put a therapist in a box that, oh, you're perfect. You must be able to do this and that and this and that. But no, we actually are not perfect and we can get things wrong. And when I speak to people outside of the therapy office and just have healthy conversations, I learn a lot. And it just humbles me. Yeah, and I really enjoy it. So, yeah, that's what I take.
I've got another question.
Okay.
How do you, as a therapist, not internalise other people's issues and not take it home?
Good question. I would say supervision, first of all, because therapists, we have a supervisor. So after our session, we speak to our supervisor about our clients, our caseload. We can offload if we feel that we've had a client that was quite difficult or close to home. So supervision in the work sense. I'm so used to it. I've been working in this industry for over 7 years. So I feel like I've got used to not internalising things and not taking it home. And prayer, in all honesty, just praying before sessions and praying that I don't take on any energy that's not for me. And yeah, I think that. But having said that, actually, I remember I had a client and she was really unwell. And she was older than me. this was in the NHS, and she said to me, "Oh, what do you know about what I'm struggling with? You're just a however old you are, and what's happening to me is going to happen to you too."
Oh, girl.
And that got me.
We rebuke those curses, child.
Amen. But that got me, and that was the first time I ever cried. I was like, wow, people can actually make you feel that way, you know? And then I spoke to my manager about it, and she was like, don't internalise it, you know? This person is struggling, and we need to understand that they're struggling and what that comes with.
Yeah.
And I guess my knowledge on mental health, I understand that depression comes with these symptoms, anxiety comes with these symptoms, so not taking it too personal.
Yeah.
So yeah. Oh. Nice questions.
Amazing answers.
Ooh, I love that.
I love that
Thank
for us.
you.
I love this for us. Yeah, no, amazing.
Oh,
no. This was really lovely.
Really good. Oh, I loved it.